Two Southern California men are now facing charges in connection with an alleged plot to attack the UFC fight at the White House. Federal officials arrested 5 men, including 24-year-old Brian Omar Roa and 32-year-old Michael Allen Thomas. Both are from Riverside County. Court documents show the plan involved using drones to detonate explosives over the area, then using snipers to shoot people as they were fleeing.
Very frightening. Joining us now to break down the alleged plot and how FBI agents were able to thwart it is former FBI agent Dennis Franks. Dennis, thank you for being with us this morning.
Good morning.
So the FBI says these suspects use the messaging app Signal to communicate. That app is encrypted and messages are often deleted. So what difficulties does that present for law enforcement, and how did they get to the bottom of this one?
It does present difficulties because they are encrypted communications, and I don't know that there's a way to really intercept them or go back unless one of the defendants, one of the arrestees, was cooperative and provided his device for them to view the messages that had been sent. I kind of think that's probably what happened here.
And Dennis, it's believed that most of the members of the group had prior military experience, and messages show they varied in their beliefs about the status of the United States. So what do we know about this group of people and maybe a possible motive?
Yeah, I'm finding with a lot of recent attacks or attempted attacks that there's not a clear ideology established, whether it's far left or far right. In this case, it seems that there was more of an accelerationist type of movement, that they wanted a rapid destruction of the government's what I think, and this was an attack to help accomplish that. There were obviously anti-Israel comments in there, and I think there was some indication that they had grievances about the Epstein files not being released. So it's sort of a mix of ideology. But what I do think is that, and I think this is where social media platforms have contributed to ideologies, that people espouse. Behavioral experts call some people grievance collectors. They blame issues, their problems, their personal problems on other people. They look for causes. A couple of decades or so ago, working terrorism matters and even in the private sector, working investigations, I found that what I categorize some people as malcontents looking for a cause. And these social media platforms provide avenues for like-minded people to get together and espouse ideas. Now, part of the investigation, if I were still in the FBI, I would really want to get to the bottom of this. I think there's some information that were a lot more involved. It's just that 5 were arrested. There was probably just enough evidence to arrest 5. I would want to know, was anybody pulling the strings on this? Was there a puppet master? Was somebody inspiring this? Is there a group, an organization, a sponsor? And it could even be a foreign state actor that had active measures against the U.S. So that's part of the investigation I would be interested in.
Absolutely. You talked about social media being a breeding ground for some of these extremist ideologies, which we've seen in other cases. The mother of one of the suspects here actually tipped off police when she noticed concerning behavior. What are some signs that people should be looking out for? If they're not on these apps, hearing people talk about this, are there other signs that people may notice?
That's a good question, and I think that was a very critical aspect of this investigation that led to identification and arrest. As far as things to look out for, I think that just any aberrant, troubling behavior, any indications that there's an acquisition of additional weapons, ammunition, things of that nature. If they're espousing really extremist views in any way, that could be an indication of some issues there. It's an individual case-by-case basis, I think, but it is, I think, important on the public and families to take note of any really changes in behavior and connections, associations that they notice that their relatives or other people they know, coworkers, are involved in that is troubling. In this, obviously, I think the mother picked up on that. Her son was connected with a group that had dangerous intent.
All right. Thank you so much for your perspective. Former FBI agent Dennis Franks, thank you so much for joining us.